It's going to be special. So let's get started. Welcome to our first session, War on Women's Bodies, with Dr. Julia Long, Fiona Broadfoot, Paula Boddington, and Dr. M.
Thank you so much, Ali. Well, good morning, everyone. Wonderful women. Oh, I wish you could all be up here and then you'd see how great you all look down there. And it's amazing for me because I actually had my old cataract surgery done last autumn, so I can actually see everyone, which is a bit of a novelty. No specs, although I have to coordinate looking at the laptop, so I need my specs for that. But it's really fantastic to be here. I know we're running a little bit late already, so I shouldn't take up too much time before getting on with my talk, but really just want to say a huge thanks to all the organisers. What an amazing thing you've got going on here. Not just the event, but everything that I know has gone before it and will come from it. I am so totally overwhelmed actually and impressed by what you're doing, and it's really truly an honor to be here, so thank you all so much. And the work and love that has gone into this is absolutely phenomenal, so well done everyone. I was talking with my partner before I came up, and she was saying, oh, you know, how are you feeling about the conference or the festival? You feeling nervous? You excited? I said, I'm so looking forward to it. And to be honest, I've been doing a bit of supply teaching these past few weeks. So I said, as long as everyone just stays in their seats and I don't get crunch up bits of paper lobbed at me and no fights break out, at least until the evening, I will consider that a really nice, relaxing day, to be honest. So there was, something else I thought just before we get going is knowing that we've obviously got these very important, you know, there's some very knowledgeable politicians you got up here who are making all these very important political developments for you. So I thought, shall we get a little bit in practice for April Fool's Day? Shall we all commit a hate crime to just get us get things underway? So if I ask, I was trying to think who they all are. I'm a bit behind the times, but what about, what's that man who calls himself Ida Bryson? What, is he a woman or a man? His name's Adam something, isn't he? And what about old Mriddle Wada, is it? Man, all right, there we go. There's plenty more, but I thought we'd just get warmed up with a few exercise the older hate faculties in our brains and get all the neurons and synapses all going in that direction. Okay, so I'm going to get on with my talk now because I'm already probably halfway through what I should have been saying. So, we were asked to put something together on the war on women's bodies. I do want to say straight off, obviously you can't separate women from our bodies. We are our bodies, and as that book says, you know, my body is me. So any war on our bodies is a war on us, isn't it? And I think actually, in a way, if we think of it as our bodies, we already kind of detach the full implications of it from the war on ourselves. What I decided I felt was very important to talk about is something that I haven't seen talked about that much, because obviously a lot of our attention has been taken up with I wouldn't even call it an ideology of gender identity, because it's just a massive lie. I think ideology is actually too grandiose a term for something that is basically a lie, because a man can't be a woman can't be a man, and that's basically the end of it. But because our time has been so taken up with all of that and all of the terrible things that result from that lie being spread through all our institutions, I think we've been maybe paying a bit less attention to some of the really fundamental aspects of our oppression that I wanted to just bring into the room and have a think about today. So I've called this Mind-Forged Manacles, and because I haven't got my glass, I can't see what else I've called it. I asked a question, didn't I? Are beauty practices, this is about beauty practices, in particular cosmetic surgery, are these things consistent with women's freedom? I wanted us to think about our freedom and think about these things that are kind of very much part of the culture, and are they consistent with our freedom or are they not? So, sorry, Charlie, can you put the next one? I forgot, it's that slide, not mine. No, you're going the wrong way. That's the last slide. Don't tell them the ending. That's... Okay. Can you not? It's mainly images. There's not too much writing on it. Oh, all right, I'll just keep talking anyway. I said if it doesn't work, we're just going to act it out, because it's mainly images, and I think we could do a good job and make it very memorable anyway. Right, well, I'm going to do it so at least I can see my own slides, even if we haven't got them up there, so I know what I'm supposed to be saying. All right, so see, I didn't really want to tell you. I wanted everyone to see if they recognized it. The first image is an image of the Freedom trash can. Does anyone here know about the Freedom trash can, where it comes from, what it was? Anyone want to say? Shona's nodding very sagely over there. Yeah, it was actually, the Freedom trash can was part of the demonstration in America, the Miss America pageant of 1968. They had a big demonstration there. You can still see footage of this online, so some of you might have seen it. And that demonstration that they had outside the Miss America pageant I think it was one of the really kind of foundational moments of the early women's liberation movement. And I think it's very significant that not only were they protesting what was going on inside the hall in terms of that competition, but they also brought along this big, well, we call it a bin, wouldn't we? The big trash can. And women were encouraged to bring along things that everyone, those women who attended that demo all thought were instruments of their oppression. So they sound a bit old-fashioned now, like eyelash curlers, girdles. I do remember women wearing these, girdles, false eyelashes. Oh, there it is. That's, yeah, hard to see, isn't it? Oh, this is mine. Oh, all right. Okay, we'll just do it. Oh. All right, okay, it's a bit hard to see, never mind. Yeah, I don't know, women's magazines, all these kinds of things, high-heeled shoes, and they were lobbed into the trash can. And actually, it's from that protest, from that action, that there became this myth about women's libbers as bra burners, because one of the journalists reported that they'd been setting fire to these things, but they hadn't actually done that. But it still it made a good journalistic angle, I suppose. So that's where it came from. And I think it's very telling that was seen. It wasn't a kind of a niche thing that, these few very extremist lesbian separatists thought that these things were harmful to women. This was so much a core of the women's liberation movement at that point. And I kind of wonder where we are now in terms of that understanding. Oh, can I have the next slide? Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. I don't know quite how visible it is. So just a few years after that, in her first book, Woman Hating, Andrea Dworkin, some of you again may have seen this, Andrea Dworkin, in one of the sections, was talking about beauty practices and how beauty practices, in her analysis, she felt was so instrumental to women's oppression. The fact that these standards of beauty, whether we actually subscribe to them or not, this fact that these standards of beauty are so present in the culture and can be so foisted on women and, really kind of forcefully marketed at women, and women are encouraged to participate in these things. And in her book, she made a very good case, I think, as to why this was so harmful. And I'll come to the nature of her argument sort of right at the end. But one of these things that she did, which is probably too hard to see here, was she did a diagram of a woman's body, and she said, in the text accompanying it, she says, "In our culture, not one part of a woman's body is left untouched or unaltered. No feature or extremity is spared the art or pain of improvement." And she did this diagram, and she went, she annotated it, and said all the different things that women were expected to do, or that were kind of sold to women, or marketed to women in the culture. And what is very striking to me, I know it's going to be too small to see that, but it's just like how much further things have gone now from those days. Because, for example, I remember where she put like the buttocks, she put girdled, which women would be. I do remember seeing like my mum and female relatives getting undressed and having all these different layers of petticoats and girdles, and all this stuff going on. But obviously now, with all the so-called advances in medical practices and technologization of all of these beauty practices, now that obviously we've got the modern equivalent of shapewear, but we've also got things like liposuction, these Brazilian butt lifts, all these really very, very serious procedures that are kind of marketed in a very trivialized kind of way that can have very, very serious consequences for women, these kinds of things. So we've also, I think, decided that there were a few more body parts even than Dworkin would have noticed when she did that diagram, because I do remember a few years ago reading about the thigh gap. I don't know, probably most of you are too sensible to read any of this nonsense there, but anyway, there's all these new body parts, and then I think it was the armpit. They're constantly trying to invent new parts of our body that we weren't even aware of, or probably haven't even got. I haven't got much of a gap between my thighs, probably most of us haven't, but all of these things like new, or the elbow, or the this, or the that we're all supposed to be worrying about and beautifying and all the rest of it. And I think in terms of the pressures on young women in particular, it's extremely pernicious. So I put this image up, which I'll just again probably, I don't know how well you can see it, but I thought this is an image of it's actually from I got it off the internet. It's from schoolgirls in Japan going to school. But I see girls going to school every day, like getting dropped off for school, getting out of the car with these really like microscopic skirts, and they're just immediately yanking them down. And I'm sure if any of us live near a secondary school, this is what we see, don't we? Like this, how can girls participate in an equal way to the boys in schools when they're at constant risk, as soon as they sit down, at constant risk of exposing themselves and the the expanse of legs that are on show. And this is totally normalized. And I know there's a lot of talk about schools at the moment, what's going on, what kids are being taught in schools, the whole kind of really concerning practice of so-called like socially transitioning, this is a nonsense term, but pretending that some kids are the sex that they're not. All of this is going on, and it's taking up a lot of our time. But in terms of just the everyday experience of girls, how can we look at this and think this is in any way okay? How can any girl be free in this kind of context? So, but obviously that sort of that kind of display of flesh, which young girls obviously think that they feel some way compelled to do that, to participate in that, is in the context of women. Basically, in fact, it's quite refreshing to see that everyone did remember to get dressed this morning, because at a lot of events, it really looks as though someone's forgotten that last stage of actually putting on your clothes on top of your underwear. But we're all used to seeing, aren't we? Like, it really broke my heart when I saw that, this most amazing goalkeeper, Mary Earps, turn up to the Sports Personality of the Year, basically in some kind of like bondagey, fetishy underwear, and we're used to seeing her. Again, can you actually see these, or is it not much point? Yeah, can you see them? Like, we're used to seeing her in that bottom picture there, looking, so powerful, so, talented, it's like so brilliant in her field, and then we see her like that at that. It's really quite something for a woman to even win that award. But I've never seen a man turn up in his Y-fronts or his boxers to accept it. But this is what we're supposed to expect as normal. And this woman on a chat show, again, I don't know how well you can see it, but I think these images are so telling. This woman, again, basically wearing underwear, and look at how exposed she is compared to the two men either side. Even the other woman's, having to expose all her legs, and that's going to involve all the waxing, the shaving, the whatever. But she sat there basically in this half naked, and then you've got these two men completely covered, and don't they look so much more relaxed in their posture? And I think these are the things that are so normalised. I'm sure we see it, but it's something that we're supposed to kind of not pay attention to. Anyway, how is someone timekeeping? I'm sure I'm up to my time already. Where's Laura? Laura, you're supposed to be keeping me to time. Where's she gone? Oh, I'm just going to carry on. Sorry? Where is she? She's watching me. Oh, she's there. How long have I got, Laura? Oh, all right. Oh, fine. It'd be better if it was someone right here, actually. You could just, like, pull me off. Because, really, I have got far too much. Anyway, so, again, I was just thinking the fact that all this terrible trans, nonsense has taken up so much of our time. I've seen a lot of commentary about the harms of breast binders, the fact that, again, these are becoming things that are quite, even actually become normalised among young women who are very, might think that they're boys or think they're non-binary or whatever. So I think we're all quite well versed in the harms of those. But what about all the other, we're very conscious, I think, at the moment of all these masculinizing practices, all the terrible things that are doing in terms of the puberty blockers, the binders, heaven help us, even potentially for some of the surgeries. But what about all the feminizing practices? The feminizing practices are what galvanized the women's liberation movement. So are we saying, oh, these are fine? As long as you don't do the other things, these are all fine. Well, actually, what about shapewear? If you regularly wear these, basically this kind of corsetry, they do the same sort of compression of the internal organs. They give you bladder problems. They can give you digestive problems. They can make you more prone to UTIs. All of these things. Those bloody high heels there. And there was, some of you might have seen in the news recently, there was a feature about really young primary school age girls buying all this, being marketed at and buying skincare products, anti-aging products and things like that, when that skin rejuvenation when you're 8 years old. So that's what that last image is. So I just think, I don't think that these are all these different issues that, oh God, there's not enough hours in the day to just do one, so we've got to do this. It's all part of the same thing. And I just think I feel we need to have this consciousness about these harmful practices that aren't that, a million miles apart from each other. And partly what is driving some young women to, think that they're boys is because they want to get out of all of this stuff. And so we have this whole vocabulary about gender non-conforming children. We almost teach it or talk about it as though it's another identity. Oh, we've got these gender non-conforming girls and they're particularly vulnerable. But don't we want all girls not to conform to this world that is That is the women's movement, is to not conform. So I think we have to be very careful about just creating another identity of GNC that applies to these particular girls. I think we want that to apply to all girls. We want all girls to be free in their bodies, to not be subjected to the kind of bullying that goes along that they will encounter if they don't go along with some of these practices. Okay, so, and just to make a similar point, I put a couple of images here. I'm sure we all know who these two individuals are, and we've seen plenty of commentary about the harms that have been done to them. Really appalling. Oh, sorry, do you not know? So there's Jazz Jennings and Ellen, who now calls herself Elliot Page. And I've seen a lot of commentary over the past few years about the terrible physical harms that have been done, and psychological and everything else that goes along with it, they've been done to these to individuals. And I know I'm not comparing like with like, because one in particular was already a celebrity. But I just thought, how many of us will recognize any of these women? Probably, I don't know if does anyone recognize any of these women? I must admit, there was one face that I recognized, but the rest of them, it all just came from me looking online. These are not women that we know about in any detail, or that they're not recognizable to us. So I'm just going to tell you. Sorry, I just find it's so upsetting. You know, these things that are just done and kind of, it's today's news, and then by tomorrow we've gone on to some other terrible thing. So from left going to right, the first woman there, her name was Leah Cambridge, and she died following a Brazilian butt lift procedure that she went to Turkey and had that done. She was 29 years old, mother of 3 children, and she died as a result of that, you know, of that terrible thing that she went through. On the top in the middle there, that woman's name is Claudia Aderotimi. She was a British woman who went over to America. Now, some of you may remember this. This was in 2011, and she went over to America and had this, I think it was silicone, some terrible thing injected into her buttocks, actually, incidentally, by a man pretending to be a woman who has now, thankfully, at least been jailed for that, and she died shortly after that procedure. The woman at the bottom there was, I think Claudia, was 20 when she died, or possibly 21. The woman at the bottom there is Morgan Ribeiro, who again tragically died early this year. She was 20 years old, and she had also gone to Turkey for a gastric sleeve procedure, gastric sleeve surgery. Died as a result of that. And then the 2 women on the end. The woman at the top, her name is Jan Spivey or Spivey. The woman at the bottom is Ophelia Jones, and they are both survivors of the PIP breast implant scandal. Do you remember that? From it kind of broke about sort of 10, 15 years ago now. They had industrial grade silicone implants put into their breasts, which subsequently, for a lot of the women, the silicone, this industrial grade silicone leaked, or the implants ruptured. They've got lumps of silicone in their bodies, causing them all kinds of terrible pain, exhaustion, health problems, and they're still involved in this legal case to try and get some kind of compensation. There's been some developments of that in recent years, but that was a long time ago, and they're still involved in that legal claim. So these are the kinds of things. These women were kind of, we could say, uber gender conforming, and look at their outcome for some of these. Absolutely horrific. Okay, I'm just going to, probably down to my last few minutes. So I won't talk through all this slide, but this slide was really just to show that cosmetic surgery is still very much on the rise. I think we're waiting for the 2023 figures, but when the figures for 22 came out last year, and it was the biggest increase in cosmetic surgery that we'd seen in this country. It was 102%. It was the first time that it had gone into like 3-digit figure. Obviously, there was some of the backlog from the lockdown, but even notwithstanding that, it was the highest increase in procedures since 2004. So some people think, oh, because there's all these other new procedures, like all these so-called non-surgical but still invasive procedures, that cosmetic surgery is going down, but it's absolutely not. And when people also say, oh, but men are also subject to some of these pressures, yeah, to a certain extent they are becoming more so, because that's another profitable market. But of these 30-odd thousand, 31,000 procedures that were carried out in 2022, 93% of these were done to women, 93%. So it's hardly a kind of equal opportunities violation that we're seeing here. Okay. I'm going to skip a lot of the slides, but I just wanted to say we talk a lot about compelled speech, usually restricted really just to talking about pronouns, isn't it? That we see this thing about compelled speech around pronouns, like I don't want to be, well, I certainly don't want to be, I'm sure none of us want to be compelled to call a man she, and all of that. It's all very important, but I think we're a bit naive if we think it's only in that area that our speech is, they're trying to compel it, and if it's only in that area that we, there's a lot of talk about free speech, but how much free speech do we have when the language of the culture is so thoroughly patriarchal? It's a really, really extensive and wide-reaching issue. It's certainly not just around pronouns. So when I was looking into all of these procedures around cosmetic surgery, all the rest of it. For a start, calling it cosmetic surgery totally trivialises it. I think it's like domestic violence. As soon as you put domestic, you're trivialising the violence. As soon as you put cosmetic, you're trivialising what's being done. But most of the time, they don't even call it cosmetic surgery. It's all this very infantilising, trivialising language. Tummy tuck, boob job, these things get referred to as boob jobs and tummy tucks and all of this very trivializing, making out that it's nothing very serious. But that's an image. It's certainly not the most graphic image I found, but there's an image of what actually has happened with this woman's breast has been sliced open, and either the violence that is used to insert a silicone implant really is quite something to behold. So what would be the difference to our attitudes if we stop calling them boob jobs, if we stop calling them breast augmentation, which is just the nice anodyne clinical version, and we started calling it female breast mutilation? We say female genital mutilation, but what is that if it's not the mutilation of a female breast? So the language is very important. Right, I'm going to come right on to the end. Sorry, I will finish. I'm going to skip all of these things. Maybe we can talk about some of it. Okay. Ooh. So, one of the things that I was saying that I wanted to say near the end is the kind of supportive discourses, the supporting structure, the kind of supporting psychology that allows these terrible things to be done to women in our culture. And I think one of the things is it's presented in terms of the opposite of what it is. So it's all about confidence and well-being and choice and affordability and all of these kinds of things. And the only risks, if any kind of risk or cost to the woman is ever even addressed, it's only in terms of when things go wrong, like the physical risk. So I wanted to raise the question, what are the risks to women? What is the cost to women, not just in terms of our physical bodies, but in terms of our psychology, in terms of our presence in the world? What is the cost and the risk to women of being endlessly treated as some kind of perfectible, always to be improved, always to be worked on, perfectible, sexualized, basically fetish object for men? Because that ultimately is what this is all about. It's all about the male sex right and the men's right to be sexually aroused by women endlessly doing all these torturous things to our body. What is the cost of that? What would Dworkin say if she was going to come back and do that diagram? So you'll be glad to know this is my last slide, and I really couldn't put it any better than Andrea Dworkin said 50 years ago this year she was saying this, and things have just got so much worse. So she says, standards of beauty describe in precise terms the relationship that an individual will have to her own body. They prescribe her mobility, spontaneity, posture, gait, the uses to which she can put her body. They define precisely the dimensions of her physical freedom. And of course, the relationship between physical freedom and psychological development, intellectual possibility, and creative potential is an umbilical one. So what she was saying, our physical freedom and any curtailment of that is intimately linked to the ways in which we can develop and flourish as whole, wonderful women that we are. So I would just like to really end with a plea to make that case of all of these feminization processes and the impact they're having on our freedom. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you now then, Fiona. Yep, okay. I'll pass this along to you. Oh, is this still? Yep. Okay, so I am absolutely overjoyed to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker, I'm sure, needs no introduction from me. Fiona Broadfoot is an activist and that's an understatement, isn't it? Is an activist and founder of the Build a Girl Project, a survivor-led social enterprise working with young women at risk of or experiencing sexual exploitation. And I would only add to that she's one of the most inspirational women I have ever met in my life. So everyone, please welcome Fiona Broadfoot.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here with amazing women. My mum's a Scottish woman. I'm really proud to say. So, yeah, I love this place. It's fab. And I'm so honoured to be sat at this table. I just want to share with you my journey to being the CEO of Build a Girl. It's a beautiful project, and I'm really, really proud. And I never said positive things like that at one time. It took me a lot to say anything good about me or the work I do. So I sit here a very proud woman. As a young girl of 15, when I was a bit obnoxious and a bit of a prat, really, I had the misfortune to meet a man who trafficked me from the city I was brought up in, Bradford, to London. I was put on the street, a very naive 15-year-old girl, no clue about what was before me. The first man who paid to abuse me, total shock, horror, and disassociation. I probably should have given a bit of a health warning, but I mean, you know, you're not going to come to these events and listen to jolly rainbows and unicorns and all that shite. But anyway, so I immediately disassociated from myself, or tried to, kidded myself, and lost my identity as Fiona. I was in a world of extreme violence and abuse, relentless, from the man who trafficked me to every single man who paid a pittance to abuse me, every single one, 10 a day, for a long, long, long time. I accepted they would beat me. I accepted they did whatever the fuck they wanted to do to me, because I thought they'd given me a tenner, so they were allowed to do what the fuck they wanted to me. I eventually got away from my first perpetrator and straight into the hands of another one. I was arrested and charged while standing with this known pimp. He was very well known to the Vice Squad. And they arrested me, said good evening to him, and charged me with being a common prostitute or a child. I was bailed to his parents' address. I was then sent to a girls' unit for naughty girls. All of us had been picked up off the street. There were no intervention, there were no support. We were blamed, we were shamed, and we were criminalised. Eventually, he left me for dead, the pimp, and I was hospitalised on a mixed ward, and I was sexually abused by a man on the ward. I signed myself out. I got myself back to a city where I knew a woman who might help me, and sadly, my pimp found me 3 days later and kicked her door in and kicked my teeth out. I went into a women's refuge, but I didn't tell them that I was in the sex trade because they wouldn't have given me a bed. It's still problematic for women because they say they bring harm, they other us, they separate us. We are women and girls first. All of us are sisters first. And so I had to not tell anybody about the prostitution. It was clear that I'd been kicked to shit, and they gave me a bed, and I got a key worker, and I tried so hard to exit. I went to college to do childcare. I am really maternal, and I know that's what we build a girl. I'm like the mum to them all. I just, yeah, anyway. I kept my head down. I did really well at college until I had to do a practical placement, and my 8-page double-sided record landed at the head teacher's desk, and I was frog-marched off the premises and kicked off the college course. I went back to prostitution. I worked in a brothel. I thought it was fine. I scrubbed myself in boiling water and Dettol. I told myself every day that I was fine, it was okay. I was making money. I never had any money. I had fuck all. You were fuck all to these men with the bouncing fucking erections, knowing full well you are underage. These are our husbands, our brothers, our neighbours, our butchers, our doctors, our teachers, you fucking name it. They think they've got the entitlement. They've got the bell ends. They do what the fuck they want with no accountability. And guess what we've done now? We've sanitised it all and called it work. Sex work. They're in universities recruiting girls into the sex trade, telling them, oh, we'll top up your salary, your grants, go dance round a pole, go sell yourself on, what's that bloody vile, OnlyFans, I mean, for fuck's sake. Anyway, so there I am. It's all fine, just keep a lid on it, it's all fine. And I turned my TV on one day and got the shock of my life. My beautiful cousin had also been groomed into the sex trade, and she didn't make it past 17. She was murdered by a man who were paying to abuse a girl. He'd just been released from prison. He got 2 years for the manslaughter of a 19-year-old young woman on the streets. A body was found in the footwell of his car, and he got off on the grounds of provocation. He did fuck all time. He got out of prison. He murdered my beautiful cousin. And that's what shook me into that reality. And boy, did it hit me with a bang. I've never sold myself since that day. And it's a long, long time ago. Unfortunately, I found good women. I met Jalna Hamner, who was a big influence in my life and support. I learned about feminism. I were able to go to conferences. I were able to meet other women. I were able to speak about my life, and it was so important. I had a platform to do that. I've been shouted down for years and years and years by pro-sex work arseholes. All, by the way, white privileged and have never seen a fucking street corner in their life, let me tell you. And I sometimes think to myself, if you think it's so great, get yourself out there. Get your daughters out there. Is it acceptable for your daughters? You know? No, I'm sure not. The other fantastic thing that happened is I had a baby. And I had a boy, and I was terrified. I was terrified he was going to be a perpetrator. Because I was so convinced they couldn't control it. They couldn't help it. That's all the narrative I had in my head all my life. But I can tell you now, he knows. That thing in your pants, mate. Don't ever, or with these, or with that, or with any fucking thing else, don't you dare think as a boy or a man you can go out there and hurt women and girls, because I'll be the first one to pull you up about it, pal. And actually, he's a really lovely young man, I have to say. He's been surrounded by radical feminists all his life, and he's a fucking good lad. Anyway, so I started to speak out, started to do all this, started to try and make some sense out of my life, tried to go to university again, got knocked back because of my criminal record. So I thought, right, I'm having them. I went to the Royal Courts of Justice, supported by Harriet Wistrich, brilliant lawyer. I had a female team, female-only team. And I took the estate to court and I won. And unfortunately, women who've been prosecuted. I mean, how could they criminalise us and let these bastards drive around wanting girls in school uniforms, wearing the wife's kinky underwear with their erections, all fetish perverts. That's why I won't stand in support of any bloody bloke wanting to bloody put a frock and lipstick on. Having said that, my son has been a dame in his time, so I'm probably a bit of a hypocrite, but anyway. I took the state to account. We won, but we're still criminals on the PNC until we're 100. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? Because I tell you what, men would buy us till we're 100. That's how fucking weird and kinky, the pervs. Bleh. Anyway. So I got my record cleared on a DBS. So that means for other women and girls, they can go on to employment, they can go on to education, and they won't have this, because it's a catalogue of abuse. That's what it describes. It's not a record, but often we have, mine were 8 pages, double-sided. That's how many times I got picked up by the cops and charged. It beggars belief. So eventually, a youth organisation let me in the door. They did treat me like, they were very careful not to let me too near children because of their concerns of my past. There was a bloke who worked in the organisation and he were getting sexual favours from a vulnerable volunteer. I found out, I whistle blew, and I lost my job. I had a breakdown at that point. I just had a breakdown. And in that time, I remembered the sexual abuse I experienced as a child. I'd never even remembered it in my head before that. And it was an uncle. And thank God he's dead now, the bastard. I'm going to go piss on his grave. He's buried in Strathpeffer, not far from here. Anyway, but he perpetrated violence against loads of us in our family, and including the young woman who were murdered, my cousin who were murdered. So I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to shoot the bastards. No, I didn't. I thought, right, and so I applied to the School for Social Entrepreneurs. I told them in a 2-minute pitch that I wanted to build political, feminist, strong young women who were not going to take this shit no more. And believe me, they are amazing, the girls who come to Build a Girl. They are absolutely amazing. All my volunteers have to have feminist training. They all have to read Andrea Dworkin. They're not allowed in the door if they think a fucking bloke in a frock's a woman. No way. We don't have any of that language. The girls and young women are absolutely brilliant. They're from really poor backgrounds often. Many of the females in their families have never ever had an education or worked. And 100%, and one of my directors is here to confirm it, 100% of the girls that have attended Build a Girl are at university. They're at university. Or they're certainly on the way to uni. They're at college building their dreams. And they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. They're fantastic. Please support us if you can. We've got a stall upstairs just selling tote bags and what have you. But every penny that we raise goes towards the work, direct work for girls and young women. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fiona. So our next speaker is Paula Boddington. Dr. Paula Boddington is an associate professor of philosophy and healthcare at the Geller Institute of Aging and Memory. Oh, I think that I could maybe benefit from such an institute myself. What was I saying? No. Of Aging and Memory at the University of West London. She specialises in teaching, research, ethics, applied ethics, ethical, legal and social implications of genetics and genomics, and medical law. So cram all of that into the time. But no, please take your time. Thank you very much, Paula.
Thanks very much, Julia. I'm not quite sure where you got that from, but anyway. So my talk is going to be. Can you everybody hear me? Is it? It's not on. Is it on? It is on. Yeah. It is on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my talk is going to be completely different to Fiona's talk. I'm really humbled to be speaking after you. But my background is in philosophy, and I've done a lot of work in relation to medicine, but also a lot of work in relation to new technologies such as artificial intelligence. And what I want to talk about is I'm going to start my talk with a puzzle. Some of the things I'm going to say are going to sound really abstract because I'm a philosopher, so I like abstract ideas, but I think they blend really well with a lot of the things that Julia has been saying about the culture of disembodiment that we're currently living in. But all this gender ideology and all this extreme cosmetics, so-called cosmetic surgery couldn't really exist unless we had a culture of disembodiment, and it's as if we treated our bodies just like something we can endlessly tinker with. So I want to start with a puzzle. I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. At the same time, more and more now, we're understanding in more detail the really complex and dynamic relationship between a mother and a growing child, both in the womb and after birth, with really profound and detailed communication between the growing fetus interacting with the mother, the ways in which the mother's breast milk will respond to the needs of a baby and so on, in this dynamic, holistic system. And rather than using this knowledge with awe and respect and using it perhaps to foster this relationship where it's needed, such information appears simply to be geared towards refining attempts to displace or replace the mother and destroy this bond with technologies such as surrogacy, moob juice, and even attempts to create entirely artificial wombs and so on. And there are many, many other examples I could give. So the more we understand the complex and living holistic world around us, the more it's seen as something we could just tinker with and alter. So there are certain ideas current in science and tech which put together can lead to an assault on the human body, and in women's bodies in particular. Women's bodies always bear the brunt of this onslaught for various reasons, but including the ways in which women's bodies force us to confront the fact that our minds, ourselves, are embodied in a material world. They forced us to realize that we are our bodies. We need to look at the mind and the body. So I'm afraid you might not have expected at this time of the morning to have a talk on the philosophy of technology, but you're trapped, and if you leave now, you don't get any lunch. So I'm going to continue. So I'm going to start around 400 BC in an overview of some key ideas that can be used as tools to understand some of the technological war on bodies. But I'd also like to issue a disclaimer, which is that a point of optimism, because for every bad idea in philosophy, there's several which are much better. And so name a position, and somebody will have thought of the entirely opposite position. So there is indeed much in contemporary thought that's pushing back against these underlying ideas. So there are ideas which have usefully served a purpose in science, but which, left loose in the wrong context, can wreak havoc. So first of all, how do we think about the natural world around us? So Aristotle, writing about 300 or 400 BC, a philosopher and a biologist, considered that everything in the natural world had its own purpose and its own function, and the good of each type of thing, including us, consisted in harmonizing that purpose or function, pursuing our own proper purposes. A teleological account of the world. Now, of course, his biology dominated for over 1,000 years, and of course a lot of it was wrong, because he was the first person doing it. So he thought, for example, that in reproduction, the male provided the form, the information, the seed, and the woman simply provided the matter into which the man's seed was implanted. So of course this is false, but remember this for later, because, remember this for later. So in contrast to Aristotle, modern science, on the whole, views the world as if it's devoid of purpose, as if it's simply inert matter. So Francis Bacon, in the 16th century, is seen as the founder of scientific method, considered the purpose of gaining knowledge was in order to be able to manipulate the world around us according to our wishes, to make life easier for us, which is a profoundly different approach. So the world is then understood in a reductive way, breaking it down into its component parts and the laws of nature governing these, laws which we as humans are able to understand and hence make use of. And in fact, now there are many with an even more advanced attitude. So the physicist Richard Feynman in the 20th century, shortly before he died, wrote on a blackboard, "If I cannot create something, I do not understand it," which might make sense if you're talking about a car's engine, but if you're trying to apply that to the natural world, it can really easily lead to the idea that the purpose of science is to reproduce and recreate nature. So, but in the 20th century, here's a contrary voice. So Martin Heidegger, despite being a Nazi sympathizer, did have some useful things to say about technology. He argued that with strides in how we use technology to control the world, we've moved from a position where we just use nature around us to provide our everyday needs, to treating it as something we can just use as much energy and power that we have to wrest anything we want from it, to really tear nature apart. We treat the world, in his words, as what he called a standing reserve. We're just decimating the environment around us to take more than we actually need. And my view is that this is often put together with a dissociation from our bodies, whereby in many respects now our own bodies are treated as a standing reserve, as pieces of matter to be broken down and manipulated, endlessly modified, with resources such as eggs extracted from a woman for purposes not aligned at all with the good of a person from whom they are extracted, sending adverts to students at Ivy League universities because they've got good genes for $700, we'll get your eggs. So, and there are multiple pressures which also encourage this disembodiment, such as the capacity of the technology we have now to operate over distances and to present us with a virtual world. And there are also ideas prominent within computing and with AI, which put a particular complexion on how we view the mind and the self. So how we've understood the mind has always been influenced by current technologies. So in the past, people thought that we were somehow clockwork. Our bodies were sort of clockwork. But now it's common to understand humans in terms of computers or computer code, and also more precisely in terms of artificial intelligence. So we are basically what's known as wetware, inefficient versions of computer code, executing programs in pursuit of goals and running on information. So intelligence becomes the most, we are then just our minds. Oh, I've missed something out actually. So I just missed something out. I forgot, I missed something out. In the 17th century, Descartes, a lot of you probably you'll know about Descartes. Descartes introduced a sharp distinction between mind, mental substance, and physical substance for body. So we are our minds, a completely separate substance, somehow spookily managing to control this body somehow, in a way he admitted he didn't really understand. So nobody really quite believes Descartes' version of a mental substance, but this idea of a really sharp divide between the mind and the body has been really, really influential ever since. And so we can see it trickling down into computing, into AI. So we are said by some now to be in the information age. So our essence is the mind, and the essence of a mind is simply information. And that also resonates with discoveries in modern genetics and the broad idea that DNA is a blueprint, a packet of information that defines who we are. So I'm running out of time, I think, so I'm going to skip a bit. But I just want to also note that the idea of intelligence that's most current in artificial intelligence is simply efficiently pursuing our goals. That's what it is to be intelligent in the most common definition in the best-selling textbook on AI. So what our goals are is completely left to one side. You might thought that was part of what it was to be intelligent, but no, it's totally left out. So let's go back to how these ideas tend to make a bigger impact on women than on men. So say, for example, let's use the example of reproduction. Let's go back to Aristotle, because Aristotle saw the male as providing information. So we can think that we probably conceive that's not too different in terms of the male's role in reproduction now, because of how we think of DNA. So consider, say, for example, a man who's commissioning a surrogate baby. So the man provides sperm. It's not too different from a normal case. It's just like the difference between, say, arranging to get something delivered by DPD instead of taking the package round yourself. So the role of a father is not too different, but in the case of the females, things are complex. So of course we all know Aristotle was completely wrong to think that females just provide the matter, but we provide both the matter and the form, because we provide the information and we provide these two aspects of it. So we're providing like mind and body. But because of the ways in which the surrogacy breaks the women down into two different components, you have the so-called egg donor, who's only providing information, so she's not the mother, and we have the so-called surrogate, who's only providing the raw matter, so she's not the mother either. So it's possible, in a way, paradoxically, easier to say that the father is still the father, but the mother has magically disappeared. So the point I'm making is complex, and you can use these kinds of ideas. There are always complexities to it. So for the way in which our understanding of what it is to be a mother or a father is also in terms of who's actually cares for and loves and brings the child up. So these ideas are always very, very complex and nuanced. But let's just summarize. Okay, so to summarize, the war on women's bodies in many spheres, especially those connected with technology, so including surgeries, can be explained, at least in part, by the ways in which our bodies forcefully remind us we are both minds and embedded essentially in the material bodies of the world, and ways in which technology is denying that, separating the mind from the body, and thinking of the material world as something we can simply just tinker with, like you're tinkering with a car in a garage or something. And this basic brute fact of mostly in all of our bodies actually, because it does affect men as well, but disproportionately women, this brute fact of reality shows up the cracks in these dominant ideas, prominent in the use of technology, forces which incline us to think of ourselves in a disembodied way, the divorce of the mind from the body, viewing the mind as the self rather than the self as being complex and embodied. And yes, and this view of the world as simply brute matter for us to use as we will, and using science not to understand and marvel at the world and try to act in greater harmony with the world, but using science only to serve technology, and technology only to serve whatever random will or random goal that somebody wants to put in it. So I could probably, that's very, 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 very brief, but I just wanted to introduce a few ideas that link all these different areas together. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Paula, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time left for some discussion, because I think we've really kind of gone through such a gamut of some of this very theoretical stuff and some of the direct experience and the implications and the connections between the two, I think are absolutely critical. So thank you so much for that. So our final speaker is Dr. M, who I'm sure everyone again is very familiar with. I know she's certainly a regular visitor to Alloa. Dr. M is a disabled feminist writer and historian. She writes under a pen name due to threats to her safety and tweets as @PankhurstM. Thank you, Dr. M. Thank you.
Wave if you can hear me, please, at the back. Hi. So, thank you so much for hosting us, Alloa. What an amazing festival these women have put on. Like, wow. I'm so excited to be here, although I do know what I'm about to put you through, hence the nerves in my voice. I'm Dr. M, as Julia said, and if you've been to my porn talks before, well, it's the same, but a bit worse. And if you haven't been, please find a friend, and my apologies. So, let's crack on. Don't put it off anymore. Porn isn't a polite topic to talk about. no one really wants to be speaking or known for speaking about double, triple penetration and gaping anuses. Women and girls vomiting because they are being choked with cocks over a coffee at Costa or on a polite panel. And using just the word porn, well, that really doesn't work because it is just too common and banal now. It hides the brutality and the degradation done to these real women. In recent years, phrases such as food porn, poverty porn, they've all been used in editorials by The Guardian, the BBC, The Atlantic. This suggests porn is, aspirational, desirable. Lots of menus, including the Bobbing John Weatherspoon in Alloa, just down the road, according to my online snooping, now have porn star martinis. So this is normalization and glamorization of an industry attack on women and children. Oh, Dr. M, you're being dramatic. It's just a drink. No, I'm not. And here is why. For example, the search term destroyed renders 9,557 videos on Pornhub in under a second. But, Dr. M, you are using nasty search terms and looking for the extreme bad stuff. No, because these videos have millions of views, and I don't think it is all feminists like me doing their research. So I'll give you examples. Boyfriend demolishes his sexy green-eyed girlfriend's pussy. That has 45.4 million views. Blacked raw, small blonde is destroyed by the biggest cock you've ever seen. 41.4 million views. He destroys her in a sex fight and humiliates her. Come in her mouth. 22.1 million views. Fuck me like you hate me. Number 3, aggressive sex. Anal hardcore metal rod. 16.9 million views. The thumbnail advertising this one is of a man pinning her down and choking her out. I actually typed in the search bar because I got a bit bored of all this. Lovely. So, this is what Pornhub suggests as lovely sex. Her head is being held down. She is covered in cum and spit and has puffy eyes. She looks frightened and like she is gasping for breath, while a man holds an erect penis in front of her. The channel she is on is entitled Ultra Sad Slut, and this video of their definition of lovely has 5.4 million views. May you please all breathe a sigh of relief that I can't work that projector. So, I even added the term romantic in the search bar. The first video is, I made my stepsis come by fingering her and she thanked me with her holes. 1.6 million views. So like in transgenderism, women are reduced to holes. Holes they exist just to be used by men. And if pictures and videos had no impact on human behavior, why is the global ad industry in 2023 alone estimated to be worth $874.47 billion US dollars? It's having an impact. And where it's having an impact most, I believe, is porn in the pocket. So data from Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator, shows that age 9, 44% of children own a smartphone. And by age 11, this rises to 91%. It's near 100% by 14. So Pornhub's own data, although this data is skewed as they allow people to self-identify their age and sex, that in 2023, almost all users in the UK, 88%, used a smartphone to consume Pornhub content. This is up from 77% recorded in 2021. So porn is advertising. It is normalizing and reinforcing sexual violence against women and girls. I know this because a recent report found that in England and Wales, more than half of all child sexual offences were committed by other children. It states, and this is just offences that are reported to the police, that British children commit 18 rapes a day, that official figures reveal 15,000 rapes and sex attacks by under 18s in 2022. I think you note that in the report, where is boy? Girls aren't committing these rapes. Thankfully, Ian Critchley, the National Policing Lead for Child Abuse, has said that he thinks this is being exacerbated by the accessibility to violent pornography. Critchley has highlighted, this man's got his head screwed on. There's nearly always boys sexually bullying or attacking their female peers, female children. Coming up to Scotland, survey results estimated that 1 in 5 schoolgirls have been sexually assaulted, and 34% have been touched inappropriately. From the records at Everyone's Invited, a website that was the Me Too of schools, they have accounts of sexual harassment, groping, and assault from girls at 103 Scottish secondary schools and 30 different Scottish primary schools. In some cases, the primary school girls recall how they had been told to simply ignore the harassment. They were learning this from the police, I suppose, because Chris Bell of Police Scotland suggests that young people, and here he means boys, make very poor decisions, and so they shouldn't be punished. He thinks these people, boys, should be encouraged to make better decisions instead. And this is why, in the spirit of Scottish sentencing guidelines, it means rapists that are under the age of 25 are currently given a free pass. Female teachers are facing the same. In November 2023, the Teachers' Union released data that showed that 22% of female Scottish teachers said they experienced sexist and misogynistic verbal abuse from pupils daily in the previous 12 months. I have a whole different talk on boys bullying their female classmates and their teachers using AI-generated deepfake pornography. But not only do I not have the time, but I think after our talk from Fiona, maybe we don't have the emotions for it today. However, and it is in response to Police Scotland's inaction, I do want to use the words of a teen, the mother of a teen in Spain, sorry, not Spain, I'm getting confused, in America, who is taking the fight against AI pornography to Congress. And she says this moment when our boys, the boys are abusing the girls, is where we should be teaching our girls, and Westfield High School, which is where it happened, that they're worth it to fight for. And what has happened to them is not okay. And we should be teaching our boys that, my God, there are going to be consequences to their actions. Now, I was going to move on to actions and discuss how we, as a group, as women, and I'm not a parent, but some of you parents can go after smartphones, and I'm very happy to discuss this during the day. But I want to give us all hope at the end of the panel. I realized I was the last speaker. So Pornhub very proudly tells me, and everyone who wants to access, its year in review, and it tells us who is wanking to what, to when, and for how long. Well, Pornhub, Layla Mickleway, she has done her year in review, and she's taking on Pornhub. She's an amazing feminist. So she runs Trafficking Hub, and she wants to let us know that so far, because it can't verify the ages of girls depicted in the content or the users, Pornhub has shut itself down in America in the states of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, North Carolina, Utah, Virginia, and now Idaho. But Layla, as well as millions of other women, they are ambitious. So here is Pornhub's reckoning so far. 10.6 million videos had to be taken down. That's 80% of the site. 30 million images were taken down. They have been cut off by Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and PayPal. They have been sued by 257 victims in 12 lawsuits across the US, Canada, and UK, totaling billions in potential damages. They have been criminally charged by the US federal government for profiting from sex trafficking. Thousands of media articles have been written exposing Pornhub's criminality, and subsequently, they have lost all mainstream advertisers. They've been permanently kicked off of Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, losing 14 million subscribers. They've been cut off by Grant Thornton, Roku, Comcast, Xfinity, Kraft Heinz, Unilever, and many more. The CEO and COO have been forced to resign. The secret shareholder has been found and exposed. They have been forced to change upload processes and forced to start verifying those in new videos that are uploaded. The company was sold at a discount to hastily concocted private equity firm laughingly called Ethical Capital for a desperate whitewashing of its money. And this is what I want to end on. It is Lalia Mikoway's final sentence. We aren't done yet.
Thank you so much, Dr. M. So we've got about 20 minutes left. They've very kindly allowed us to go a little bit into the lunch break. So I've got a few questions here. I wanted to bring some of your voices in from the hall, because I appreciate you've heard a lot from us. So whoever wants to take this, I'm just going to take these in order, I think. So the first question was, to what extent should we focus on the behaviour, the sexist behaviour of men and boys? To what extent should that be our focus, I suppose, as opposed to focusing on ourselves? Anyone want to take that? Do we need a mic going round down there as well? Because we can just use one up here if you want to.
I get asked all the time, do I work with boys and young men? No, I don't, because I've got loads and loads of girls and young women to work with, but I think men should step up and do that stuff.
Absolutely. As Dorota said, boys need to know there's going to be consequences to their actions. I think we also, you know when you're hurting someone. So as much guidance as we can give as adults, there's bonding over this. We're seeing an increase in, for example, not just the rapes I'm listing, but gang rapes, they're group rapes, and there's a bonding aspect to this. So there's bonding over violence against women. There's an anger towards girls as well. The more girls are exceeding and entering into sports and education and things like this, the more they're getting pushed back, and they're getting pushed back through the threat of sexual violence, through the sexual taunting. Currently, child abuse has shifted. The percentage they finally clicked over that's being committed by boys, it's now 52%. It's not just adults. That's what the report found. And they're also getting very smart with it, because they're using a lot of AI to commit this. This is a new thing that's coming in. Whole peer groups in school, girls are being targeted with deepfake pornography, and it's their classmates, male classmates, taking it off their Instagrams, their Facebooks. So yeah, we really do need to target male behavior towards their female peers.
Okay, thanks. I wonder if I think it might be nice just to break it up a little bit and have if anyone wants to contribute, not just to ask questions, but also to contribute. I know we've got, like, everyone here is as much an expert of women's experience as anyone up here. So please feel free to join in, and I'd really encourage some more voices as well. Leslie, go ahead. Is there a mic? Hold on for the mic, Leslie, just so that everyone can hear.
She took her time, didn't she? Thank you. It was to Dr. M's question about sexual crimes against children now being committed 52% by children. And I'm wondering, what's the breakdown in ages in terms of perp and victim? Is there does it tend to be kids of a similar age, or is there a demographic that's going for much younger children?
That's a fantastic question. And I cannot speak with enough. I don't have my reference or my statistic to go, it's this. But at the moment, it seems to be either the same age. So when you're looking at AI-generated deepfake pornography, it will be the 15-year-old boy targeting all the girls he wants to hurt in his year group. When it's coming up to physical, sexual assaults, it's a mix. The one thing that's getting, I suppose, that is increasing, is the term to put it, is sibling. So we're seeing a higher sexual abuse by males in the family against younger siblings. And that's linked to Pornhub, where one of the most constant trends and popular video themes is stepsister, sister. That's what we're seeing. But thank you. Sorry I can't give you a better answer.
I was at a workshop with the members of Build a Girl. There were 12 girls, and they all said that absolutely every single girl is assaulted every day at school. It is normalised. Nobody does anything about it. Teachers tell them to stop making a fuss. And in fact, what happens is when the girls turn around and smack the lads or swear at them or tell them to stop, they're the ones at risk of being kicked out of school, and they're the ones that are sent to the naughty corner, as it were. It is so normalised and so, like, it's just happening every day in the high schools of the girls I work with.
Recently, I got called into my niece's school for apparent bad behaviour. I had to have a discussion because she'd been yet again sent to detention. So I spoke to her, why are you here? Why has this happened again? And she told me, he grabbed my breast, so I punched him. And I was like, that's wonderful. Where should we go for a takeaway?
Yeah, can I say two things? The first thing is about the idea of restorative justice in schools, where our quiet, compliant girls are told that they have to they have to accept an apology from the boys who are abusing them or the girls that are abusing them. Actually, no, we need to be telling our quiet and compliant girls, no, you don't need to say, it's okay, I'll accept your apology. You need to say, that's not acceptable and it's not okay and I'm not all right with it. We need to be encouraging our girls to say that in schools. And teachers need to stop using our quiet, compliant girls as teaching aids and as tools to manage the boys' behaviour. That's not okay either. And the other thing, Dr. Boddington was talking about harvesting eggs, and the Scottish Government were asking for our girls to donate their eggs. And they forget that these eggs one day are going to turn into babies who need their mums. And they need that genetic connection to their, and it's not a neutral act, it's not a kind thing to donate an egg. We're talking about a human being here, and actually the damage that fertility treatment can do to women's bodies Anybody that's been through fertility treatment knows how hard it is. Those injections, the damage it does to your body, the early, it can affect menopause, it can bring on early menopause if they're taking lots of eggs from you. Cancer is one of the side effects of that treatment. It's not nothing donating an egg. It's not like, excuse me, having a wank, is it? I mean, having a wank, you have a wank into a jar, that's an easy thing, but donating an egg is something else entirely, isn't it? And there needs to be a recognition of that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more thoroughly. And of course, one of the most important person in all this, who's left out entirely of these discussions, has no consent whatsoever, is the baby. And as you say, there's growing concern from children who are conceived in this way. There's now a phenomenon known as genetic bewilderment, when you find out that you've got no idea who your parents are. And in America, where there's basically a Wild West, there are really real concerns of inadvertently committing incest, because there's a phenomena of genetic attraction to somebody who you're related to, but you haven't been brought up with. So, and there are sperm donors there who've got hundreds of children, and but the woman, of course, you're exactly right, that it's really onerous on the woman. But what about the children of all this? It's where that relationship, the relationship between us all is being broken down. So Aristotle had a really terrible attitude towards women. I mean, he thought they were second-class citizens. But one of the things I used to teach Aristotle's ethics. One of the things in the ethics I really thought was really sweet, when he said that mothers love their children more than fathers because they've known them for longer. So, but that's like that, because he was aware of that, the natural world, treating the natural world with respect.
Okay, someone else? Yeah, go ahead. I've got a couple more questions I would like to get to as well from here, but go ahead. Yeah, we'll do it after.
Okay, I think there's a real connection between what the panel are talking about and what other people have just talked about in terms of the extent of abuse and harassment and intimidation that our girls and young women experience in all walks of life, and particularly within the education system, and what we're seeing in the wider, the implications of the trans movement in terms of undermining women's rights and dismissing the needs of girls and young women for access to female-only places, including within schools. And the thing that strikes me about all this is the importance of what's going on within our education system for training the people that are going to be working with children and young people. So education, so the teacher training that's going on, the curriculum that the teachers are being subjected to, not so much maybe the curriculum, but the whole, the attitudes, the views about how girls and boys have to be treated, the whole thing about how, girls' bodies and rights to safety, and I would say for my own former profession of social work as well, because the safeguarding implications of all of this are being completely undermined, and I'm ashamed of what's happening across those professional bodies.
Maybe I could just say a couple of things sort of in relation to that as well. I think, again, obviously the point you raise about all the trans sort of terrible lies that kids are being taught in schools is obviously a very, very pressing concern. But sort of well before that, obviously there was a lot of feminist work done on what was going on in schools. I'm old enough to remember, back in the 80s, some of the developments then, because, there was a lot written and certainly a lot talked about in terms of schools basically being gender factories, and schools are only as good or as bad as the culture. Everyone who's coming into teacher training or becoming a teacher is coming from the wider culture. So unless someone's got a consciousness of patriarchy and gender roles and, all of that stuff. Obviously, that all just gets reproduced in schools. And certainly, from what I've seen, I remember when my nieces and nephews were very little, and some of the stuff that was kind of predated all the trans stuff, but certainly in the ways, it was a bit past the stage of, if you're a girl, you do need to work, and if you're a boy, you do woodwork. But it was still very much, things like if there were special events going on, like, I don't know, fates or, charity fairs or something, like, there was all kind of products and things for sale, or money raising things for girls that were all like these little Claire's accessories type of things, and the boys was all the sporty stuff, like and we've all seen the teachers in schools often women teachers looking very feminized, and the male teachers really kind of acting or calling the lads mates and things. These kinds of things are all happening. It used to be called the hidden curriculum. It's not all that hidden, but it's what kids are being taught anyway, even aside from all the terrible trans stuff. But what I really want to make a plea for, and we haven't got a huge amount of time left, is I don't want it to be too much. I know we've all said some very distressing things up here, but I think that one of the most powerful things is the connections between women and the connections between girls. We don't see enough of like women's collectivity. I think that's when, with the Lionesses, the women's football, it's really brought about such a kind of joyous exhilaration of women's connectivity, and it's something that we feel when we come together. And I think one of the most important things that we can do, taking Fiona's very much taking Fiona's lead, is to support those young women in a very direct way as much as we can, creating spaces, creating social opportunities, and really helping to nurture, I think, particular kind of interests that, I think if you've got a real passion for, I don't know, like playing a musical instrument, or, I don't know, different intellectual pursuits or sporting pursuits, these things I think can really help to kind of, in a way, inoculate you from some of the worst of the culture that we see. It's not going to have such a big impact. I don't know, maybe that seems a little bit of a sideline, but I think, there is so much to do. Obviously, we've heard this amazing takedown of Pornhub, which is really quite extraordinary. There's all of this whole social media presence. We can spend our lives, and we do spend quite a good proportion of it, trying to basically change men and trying to change these things, but we can also spend a huge amount of time creating spaces for girls and young women, and also rejecting the gender stuff ourselves, so that they actually can see that it's not just possible, but it's also very exciting and liberating to reject these things. That's a bit of a garbled speech, but I think creating spaces for young women is so key, aside from all the kind of endless lobbying and all of that. I think that can make a huge, huge difference. I don't know, do you want to say a bit more about Build a Girl, Fiona, in that?
Yeah, I mean, I would opt for single-sex schools, honestly, when they're getting older, honestly. And no male staff near girls and young women, none. Because I can tell you now, the single biggest request when I was in the sex trade was for me to dress as a schoolgirl. The single biggest. And the amount of outreach I've done outside high schools, engaging with girls and young women, and the curb crawling. There's loads of curb crawlers. You sit outside a high school, any high school, across the land, and you will see men slowing down, perving, after our girls, all over, everywhere. But, and again, like, the reason I'm not really well funded is because I'm not doing the state stuff. I'm not engaging in pronouns and bullshit. No chance, not a chance. So I'd rather have a low wage. I'm not bothered, but obviously we all have to live. We all need a wage, and I've worked for my arse off for years, but I just think we have to be really, really, really strict about single-sex spaces, no compromise. I get called all kinds of names in my city. I couldn't give a shit. I am not compromising safe space. We need to organise more girls and young women's events, because it's great when we all get together, but girls and young women desperately need these spaces, social spaces, to be able to come and meet together and grow in solidarity and sisterhood, without a doubt.
Okay, we're nearly at past, and I think that's a fantastic note to finish on. Do either of you have a burning thing you want to say, or should? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just if you. Yeah. Absolutely. Did you want to?
Yeah. So somebody put a question to me, which I'll answer as briefly as possible, and if a person wants to find me, I can talk maybe later. So what's my view on this idea of disconnecting mind and body in relation to transhumanism? Is this the gateway to transhumanism? I'll be brief. The answer is yes. If you listen, it's really interesting, because I spend a lot of time reading and listening to sort of tech bros talking about things, and they're a bit like sheep. You know, sometimes in a herd of sheep, you'll get the occasional sheep that's really clever. It's the same with these AI people. So some are really questioning it and fighting back against it. But many people will just talk as if, oh, transhumanism, we're on the way to transhumanism. They just assume that's what's going to happen. And the reason for that, behind that, is they just assume, they go and make tech and see what happens. They just assume that that's progress. It's assumed to be change is progress. And they just assume they're littering our infrastructure with it. And it's links back to the problem of pornography. Why have all these kids got smartphones? Because they have to have smartphones. I went to Evensong in Westminster Abbey, and you had to have a fucking smartphone to download the order of service. It's like everywhere. It just becomes part of our infrastructure that we depend on it, we need it, and then it's a gateway. Smartphones at Westminster Abbey is a gateway to transhumanism. And of course, I mean, you probably all know about Jennifer Bilek and her fantastic research linking transhumanism and transgenderism. So yeah. Sorry, I kept you from lunch.
And on that image, that rather surreal image of the Westminster Abbey scenario, and I think maybe we'll leave it there. Can I just say thank you for the fantastic questions, the comments from the floor. I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come. And thank you to a really wonderful panel. Well done, everyone, and thank you. Thank you.